There we are. All right. Peace and love, everybody, and abundant blessings. Thank you. Welcome back to my channel. And I am Queen Tamara. And tonight, for Ask the Herbalist Hour, we're going to be talking to our beloved brother, always honored guest, Mikuak Rai. How
Queen
are you?
Tamara, I am wonderful in Lakesh.
In
Uh,
Lakesh.
Happy New Year in this
Happy New Year to
red
you.
self-existing moon year. So
Mhm.
happy to be able to join you at
Mhm.
Ask the Herbalist for this special moment. So thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Um, I have been observing the planetary new year for the last, oh gosh, maybe 9 years now, and following it and doing my best to stay in harmony with the natural time. So tonight, let's talk a little bit about what natural time is, and then what it mean, what the self existing moon is.
Wonderful. Yeah, great question. So natural time is timing according to nature's cycles,
Mm-hmm.
essentially. So in a specific case, we're talking about two particular cycles, that being the gestation period, which is a 260-day cycle. And then we're
Mm-hmm.
also talking about the fertility cycle, which is basically a 28-day average cycle with 13 times. So it's called 13 moons based on that mathematical frequency of 28 days as an average for the fertility cycle. And so when you look at 13 times 28, you get a total of 364 days mathematically, right? Which is almost
Mm-hmm.
the complete solar year. And so the extra day is considered a day out of time, or a day that's no day at all on the calendar, but it's truly like a pause, a reset
Mm-hmm.
before entering the new cycle. So we just celebrated the day out of time that synchronizes or aligns with Gregorian July 25th. And the reason for this timing is in natural time, it is anchored to the rising of the star Sirius.
Yes.
And so at this period of year, Sirius has begun to rise and be basically in the early morning hours. It's
Mm-hmm.
rising at that time,
Mm-hmm.
and you can see it. You can actually see it if you're up that early
Yes. Mm-hmm.
before the sun. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, it signaled many, many years ago, eons ago, essentially, it signaled the Sothic New Year, as the Greeks referred to it, the rising of the Nile Valley
Mm-hmm.
and the river. And so, in light of that, it was part of the traditions of Kemet, Egypt, was observing Sirius. And as I said, the Greeks attributed the name Sothis to it. They called it the Sothic New Year. And so, even to this day, traditions around the world will have observations that basically align with the rising of Sirius and signal the beginning of a new year. So, this is natural time in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
It is, in a way, part of advancing something called the 13 moon calendar, which was
Mm-hmm.
introduced in basically introduced in part with something called the harmonic convergence of 1987. Now,
Okay.
this was an event that took place, and it actually was the first of its kind synchronized meditation. Now, imagine, though, in 1987, before the internet, before email, or those digital ways of promotion, the technology of the time, I think, was fax machine, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, we imagine with fax machine that 1 million people or thereabout gathered at various sacred sites around the world,
Mm-hmm.
just through this call for the harmonic convergence to come together in ceremony, and that would prepare essentially the shift that we're still experiencing. We're now kind of in transition in this shift, but we're about 35 years in to that. So the new year that we're actually marking now in natural time is 35 years in the making, essentially anchored since July 26, 1987.
Okay.
So, and that was right just prior to the harmonic convergence. So these sequence of events took place.
Mm-hmm.
It really initiated this energy on a planetary scale
Mm-hmm.
and sent these kind of ripples, if you will, of change through the social fabric, the emotional fabric, the consciousness fabric of our entire lives on planet Earth, essentially. So this has set in motion a shift to wake us up from the fact that we've been under the duress of the Gregorian calendar, which was basically a way that colonization was applied and organized. The
Okay.
dominion of it was applied to all the aspects of the the empire, the colonial empire, essentially, that was essentially then organized or codified in the Gregorian calendar. So it's also very interesting to note, which is a beautiful synchronicity, on the day out of time, just 3 days ago, the
Hmm.
signature for that is yellow electric star, kin 68. On that day, part of the energy of the day out of time is universal peace, forgiveness, and reconciliation. So it is interesting in the synchronicity to note that that's the day that the Pope made his apology in Canada to leaders of the indigenous communities.
Oh,
Uh,
did.
yeah, and this happened after an event in April when several delegates from First Nations in Turtle Island, Canada, North America, traveled to the Vatican
Hmm.
to have audience with the Pope and basically express their dismay and their obviously grievances
Hmm.
with everything that has befallen First Nations people due to the imposition of the Catholic Church, under the duress of the Catholic Church. And we know that there are many layers to that. And what is beginning now to surface with the apology or with these visits is
Hmm.
just the very, very beginning of what is a long overdue healing process anyway.
Correct. Correct.
Because we as a species, and in the information age, now becoming a transformation age, we can't go forward without reconciling and restoring these wrongs that have been perpetuated. And so
Yes.
it's auspicious to see, in the interest of planetary healing, that this actually occurred on the day out of time, again, where there's a quality of universal forgiveness.
Hmm.
And it's not that the apology is necessarily what is desired,
Hmm.
when truly the restoration, the restitution to peoples that have been
Hmm.
decimated, there's no way to actually restore that. So there has to be some other
Yes.
form of acknowledgement and making right and correcting it. So the
True.
apology is just the beginning of a willingness to accept responsibility. Now to
Hmm.
move towards what is being responsible or accountable or creating greater harmony, that is yet to be discovered. But I think it's interesting because this red self existing moon year that we've now entered into, that we're in
Hmm.
day 2 of, the
Hmm.
energy for this year, in fact, I'll just read the affirmation because it really says it all. It says,
Yes.
I define in order to purify,
Hmm.
measuring flow. I seal the process of universal water with the self existing tone of form.
Hmm.
I am guided by the power of life force. I am a galactic activation portal. Restoration, balance, harmony enter me.
Hmm.
When you have a gap day, which the beginning day of this current year happens to be a gap day, which means then the whole year is
Okay.
informed by a gap day. And what does that mean? A gap day is one of 52 days where the veil, basically, between our mundane world and higher worlds is more thin. So, in other words, the
Oh.
access to communication is more direct. These are points of intersection or sensitivity where we know then again, with the year being initiated with a gap day, kin 69 red self existing moon, that actually sends that energy throughout the entire year, which is interesting to note. Just given that it is actually it's a specific energy that suggests how we define and create a form for healing and the flow of universal water, because water itself is healing. It's the healing,
Yes.
it's the universal solvent. It's the
Hmm.
substance of all things, and it's universal in fact. Now, archetypally, when we say red moon, we're
Hmm.
also speaking about an avataric energy of the healer. So
Hmm.
the moon is actually identified in this cosmovision
Hmm.
of natural time. The moon is identified as the archetype of the healer itself. So it's auspicious that this
Hmm.
apology was issued during the day out of time, Universal
Yeah.
Day of
Time.
Forgiveness. Now,
Yes.
whether they did that knowingly or not is up for question, right?
Yeah.
Because let's just say the ones that have held a suppression over the knowledge of these most important dates and alignments and synchronizations, they've suppressed it from being popular information, but they themselves know those most important dates. They know them.
Oh, that I
And
believe
so
so.
they will not only manipulate, but they'll also operate according to those particular alignments deliberately while everybody else is distracted away from those moments of greater alignment.
Okay.
So it's not even, I don't see it as a coincidence as
No, I
much as
think
I'm
they know
pretty
the
sure
energy and the
they knew
power of
they
those
were
dates.
doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because it is what it is. I mean, the day out of time is literally a space for reconciliation. So to some degree, it also suggests that as a planetary species, we're at a time when we're actually ready to more than ever before come to terms with some of these um, situations that have caused such calamity
Hmm.
at such an enormous scale that you got to begin somewhere. So
Hmm.
beginning with an apology now, I think almost kicks the door open for people from these traditions and these bloodlines to say, okay, that's a good first step. And then let's continue this.
Hmm.
Let's keep this. Let's not just discard this like this was a token representation of something. Let's actually realize the healing that has to occur, you know, and that's what this year is all about.
Okay, so this year, um, the red self-existing moon year is a year of greater forgiveness and reconciliation based on and also because you said it was a gap day, which I don't think I've heard that term used before. They where the veil between the dimensions is more transparent, more easily accessible.
Exactly,
So this
exactly.
year is going to be a year of high spiritual communication, you would
Yes,
say.
absolutely,
Hmm.
absolutely. And I feel like people out there listening and tuning into this
Hmm.
can self-reflect to consider how they're having a direct experience of that in their own ways, because
Hmm.
our intuition is heightened right now.
Yes, I
Our
would agree.
clairvoyance is heightened right now. Whether we're deliberately seeking the spiritual path and things like that or not, it's a consequence of what I call the phase shift, that we're moving and transitioning through a phase shift on a planetary scale, meaning we're at a particular phase of our planet's evolution
Hmm.
that also coincides with our consciousness evolution as human beings,
Hmm.
which also then serves a higher purpose in us actually taking a birth so that we could be part of this reconnaissance mission, essentially, like at this
Hmm.
time of repair. Because many of us who are born now and are compelled or magnetized towards a healing path,
Hmm.
we realize that there's a call to live a life of service, to live a life of actually affecting healing or facilitating healing, whether it
Yes.
be our own or it be in service to the whole, right? So
Hmm.
that's a natural consequence of where we are in the evolutionary process too. So
Hmm.
there are more souls incarnating now that
Hmm.
are jumping in because there's a different alignment on a planetary scale with where our planet is in its evolutionary pattern, that those souls will invariably take embodiment now to show up for kind of like the big crescendo of sorts that
Hmm.
we're navigating. And this is what evidenced in many, many ways, but I invite people to really consider for themselves, and things we can identify in the outer world, but
Hmm.
certainly from our inner experience too. Like, what changes are we making willingly of our own volition, or also just by necessity because maybe we have a health crisis or anything that may inform the need for change, right?
Hmm.
So right now it's a good time to choose your change deliberately and know that in practicing that change or shifting that behavior, it's having an impact on the whole. That's the way it always is,
Hmm.
but it's also that we're more aware of how it's so interrelated now, and that everything we
Hmm.
do has a ripple effect, you know?
True, indeed. Yes.
So I think there's a terminology I heard recently called astral hygiene, for example, just
Okay.
to really know what it is we're actually inviting and informing and engaging inside our auric field, to be
Hmm.
aware of that, meaning like the type of environment we keep in our own personal space, right? But then even when we're in activity or interactivity with other people, because not everybody holds the same vibration as you might, right? So then we got
Yeah.
to have our tools and our technology, our techniques to keep ourselves with a good, clear field, having good astral hygiene in that
Mm-hmm.
sense, not only when we're here, but then also for when we're in the dream time. Because one of the things, again, about those veils being thinned is it sometimes gets a little thin in between which is the dream and which is the waking state.
Mm-hmm.
And so that becomes, I think, also an experience as we're both accelerating and raising our vibration, but also as there's a mixing and a crossing of the worlds a bit in this
Mm-hmm.
transition. This is part of how it can be experienced.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing that we're wanting to, be conscious of is we're actually recollecting something that is already inherent to us. So
Okay.
as much as we're having experiences that may seem new, it's actually a part of our code. It's in us, and it, like a time release effect, it goes off at a certain period of time in our respective evolutionary patterns. Now, just think for a minute. We're 35 years into the recalibration of consciousness on Earth since
Mm-hmm.
1987 and the harmonic
Okay.
convergence, as I mentioned, to where
Mm-hmm.
we are now, 35 years in. Now, let's also acknowledge this entire cycle is a 52-year span. So to
Mm-hmm.
make the transition from prior to the Berlin Wall and the falling of the Berlin Wall to where we find ourselves now, to the Pope actually making an apology to First Nations people for colonization effectively and for all the wrongs, and it will be good to read the transcripts of what was actually said and how specific
Mm-hmm.
or how it was worded, perhaps. But just to see the energetic of what that suggests in this window of transformation. 1987, it'll be 52 years in the year 2039. So I just say that to say that this transition and the synchronization and the calibration to natural timing is not just an instantaneous thing. It's a transition. It's a process.
It's a process,
So
right?
that by 52 years, we could have effectively shifted our westernized minds
Mm-hmm.
collectively and individually out of the conundrum of the Gregorian calendar as the primary anchor,
Mm-hmm.
because anchoring it in that is not connecting us to nature and nature's biorhythm or
Mm-hmm.
the astrophysical rhythms either. Because when we talk about, for example, Sirius as the star that we're related to in our Earth
Yeah.
system, we have to understand that that's the reason the 52-year sequence is like part of the transition process. It's a reflection of the 52-year orbit of Sirius B and Sirius A. So
Ah.
this
Okay.
energetic that's working on us is much larger than we've been led to believe, because for purposes of domination and that domination code, which is sort of the purpose of the Gregorian calendar, to contain energy and direct it in a particular flow or pattern, right? In
Mm-hmm.
this case, to sort of build the machine world, that's been kind of the outcome of the colonization process, right?
Mm-hmm.
To result in an industrial era that results then in an information age and technology age that Jose Arguelles called the technosphere. And that there's been a layer put over our biosphere called the technosphere.
Mm-hmm.
That's a result of the artificial timing construct of the Gregorian calendar. That's what actually resulted in the technosphere. Now, the thing of it is, in creating the technosphere, we didn't have the foresight to think, well, if we create a technosphere that's artificial and disconnected from the organic Earth, and in fact is extractive of the Earth, that somehow we're cutting our nose off to spite our face, so to speak, right? We
Mm-hmm.
don't realize we're cutting off our own part here. We're suffocating ourselves as a
Yes.
species. We failed to recognize that, and or the systems that would uphold those erroneous decisions
Mm-hmm.
refuse to acknowledge it because it's too complicated. Because they don't want to obviously in their mind, lose control or
Mm-hmm.
power. But now we're up against a transition. We're at a point in the transition and the shift where that's kind of a moot point, because those who thought they had power have no control. Like this is why things are popping off like in so many ways with so
Yeah.
much variety, frankly,
Mhm.
that it's out of control because it was never intended to be controlled.
Okay.
It's gotten out of control because when you have alignment in nature with the whole being, the biosphere and nature, there's not control as much as there's order. There's a
Mhm.
natural order, there's a balance in that order. Control is like an attempt to put a reservoir in a water source or a flow and put like a dam on the river. That's called control. That's damming the flow. That's actually
Mhm.
doing damage. A dam is damaging, right? So
Right.
it disturbs the flow and then it'll cause water that should otherwise be constantly flowing to become stagnant
Mhm.
and then birth all
And
sorts of
blocked.
bacteria because it's organically not meant to be stagnant. It's meant to flow and prevent the, you
Mhm.
know, manifestation of all things that shouldn't be necessarily manifest if it were otherwise flowing. So I
Mhm.
think that this year is also because it's the red self-existing moon year where we're measuring flow. You can self-reflect as to what does that mean to you?
Mhm.
What is the flow or the biorhythm you want to keep? What's your flow? You know what I'm saying? Like what is the rhythm that you are in alignment to? And find that rhythm if you don't already know. And you find that by tuning in, you find that by listening, you find that by receiving, you find that by the biofeedback that we get in life when our heart opens up and we
Mhm.
feel what emerges and reflects, and we find our flow and we find our frequency, respectively. So this is a year of, as much as its definition, it's also a year of discovery, that it's okay to go with the flow, especially as now people are sort of post pandemic and the intense density of the pandemic, and we're kind of on this other side of a new sort of
Mhm.
frontier of sorts,
Yeah.
right? It's
Mhm.
very wise to, excuse me, to really be attentive to what is bringing your heart contentment,
Mhm.
like what really allows you to just kind of relax
Mhm.
into your being, you know? And if it's something that's causing you stress, then it's best to mute that, not to ignore it. I mean, obviously things come up for us to give our necessary attention to, but to the degree that something becomes a complete distraction of stress, we want to make the decision to just release things. This is a time to release them into the flow and allow them to flow on.
Mhm.
So the flow is not only how you are moving through, but it's also how you're allowing things to flow through. And that
Mhm.
could be inspiration, that could be bad habits, anything that you want to allow to flow. This is a creative window. And this is what we're being, I feel, by this universal water energy. We're also sort of like rock. We're being shaped as we
Mhm.
go with the flow. We're being shaped by this universal frequency,
Mhm.
and we're going to discover things and affinities that we didn't even know we had. There's
Yes.
actually no limit. It's just a matter of doing so in a principled way that you feel good about in your heart. Like be good with it in your heart and just, discover, like recover and discover. So that's what this year is really about.
Okay. So a lot of discovery. You mentioned that with this new year, there's the access to the spiritual communication more readily available. I've heard many great teachers talk about a time on earth where heaven and earth will merge as one again. So I'm wondering, is this that what they were referring to?
I feel
What do you
that
think?
I would say yes, in the sense that we are here to be stewards of heaven on earth. We've all heard
Mhm.
the term heaven on earth.
Yes.
It's like the idea of God speaks to people through people.
Hmm.
I feel that heaven on earth is realized through our being here
Hmm.
in this human experience to be the bridge for those higher qualities that we would describe as heavenly, you
Okay.
know, that we could describe as feeling or being an experience of heaven on earth. Absolutely. It's a part of the reconnaissance. It's also, you know, going back and reconnecting our memory, that's a part of our makeup as well, is to be in stewardship to something of that nature. Now what form does that take? I think that's a myriad of expression. I don't think there's any one form it takes, so much as it's the frequency that it imbues and inspires and emanates. It's a matter of, because again, it's coming from within, and it has that heart centric quality that is a quality that feels heavenly. It's true. And as we become more aware also of the interplay of science and spirituality and the physics and the dream time and some of these other aspects that we have to work with, it's going to become even more embodied in us. I feel that that's kind of part of this, also the bridging effect that we're having at this transitional phase. It's part of us are in our own disciplines and our own surrender. We're also here to ground those higher qualities here on earth. So in our practice, for example, our service, our creative expression, our ability to see systems and solutions for how to actually proceed, into this interesting future that is before us. There's a lot to be discovered. And I think in that process, having more spiritualized qualities will be very helpful for us navigating sort of, the terrain, of the future, and so we're in that time. And it's also beautiful because a lot of leaders have been transitioning, like, prior to and up to sort of where we find ourselves in this phase shift. And I think part of it is that there's not supposed to be one leader in this. It's actually a manifestation of collective coherence and mutual leadership. It's like shared leadership. It's servant leadership, as Dr. Martin Luther King termed it, right? That's a quality that's now becoming not just a Dr. King holding that frequency, but countless Dr. King frequency signatures of a similar purpose, right? Yes. Countless ones and ones who are of great stewardship and service, and those being the queens, the kings that we identify with, that we venerate. So, it's a lot coming through at this time, and having an artistic discipline, I think, is helpful as a way to channel some of that and even do some of those inquiries. I know for me as a musician or a songwriter, I initiated that process by asking questions, and I got responses. Like, I felt internal and otherworldly exchange of communication and ideas upon asking sincere questions, right? Right. And so you don't want to deny the answers that you receive, because it is a biofeedback reality. Like, we're not alone. And so as we're also here, we're here as a part of a greater community, we could say, the energetic, that we're actually becoming more and more aware of. Again, these are the things that have been denied us, because to actually know that you're not alone is a very empowering state of being, versus feeling that you're separated and blocked and prevented from actually expanding or questioning anything, or whatever the case may be, right? Whatever has perpetuated separation and limitation, we know that those, sometimes limitations are necessary, of course, and at the same time, forced limitation, things that we've seen happen due to the imposition of some of these older forms of leadership or control, we realize you can't control us, meaning the collective, that way anymore. It's not going to go down that way. So you have to get into alignment for what's actually happening. And part of tuning in with the natural time calendar is to begin to resensitize yourself to a timing pattern that is reflective in math and nature, that is consistent, and again, is a reflection of our fertility, our creative cycles as human beings. So, but obviously different than the Gregorian calendar, where that is a system, a method of collecting debt. That's what it was made for. It has absolutely nothing to do with your biological frequency, period. Exactly. And so it does not serve to connect us to the natural and organic reality that actually is enduring, and has been around a much longer time than the civilizations that rise and fall.
Mm-hmm.
Something I just want to point to also
Yes, please.
is let's be clear and specific to not continue to accept the narrative at all that our time of human being on this planet only goes back like 6 or 10,000 years.
Correct.
That's a lie.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the fact. And I say that from a perspective of spiritual science that says that our lifetime and the various instances of shift with our planet on its axis causing flooding at certain instances, and
Mm-hmm.
also weather dynamics and earth changes. This stuff happens in cycles. So it
Mm-hmm.
would make sense we're going through another period where we have to be
Yes.
cognizant of earth changes. But
Yes.
let's not be dismayed as if this is the first time we've experienced that.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to neglect the fact that that's happened before. And there are many artifacts and archaeological points of evidence under the oceans that point
Mm-hmm.
to civilizations of
Mm-hmm.
ancient times
Absolutely.
that have been covered by the waters. And again, recognizing our planet is organic, it's going to go through earth changes. We're subject to changes of our local star, the sun. The
Mm-hmm.
sun goes through changes. And
Yes.
at certain points, like the point we find ourselves in now, we're being biologically accelerated because of our interaction and the increase in frequency of our interaction with the sun on a
Mm-hmm.
planetary scale. Some would call it the solar cycle, you know. Some refer to the last period we've come out of as a lunar period, a lunar cycle, right? Which resulted in a lot of lunacy, some could say, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Now we're coming into a period of greater enlightenment, meaning we're coming to a period of galactic scale almost, that we're cognizant that, again, we're not alone, and we're also influenced by these celestial bodies, as well as the energetics of the we could say the various density levels, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because not just the material density, this is why our skills like the intuition and clairvoyance, they're not a material skill or function of sense. They're not part of the sense organs. They're higher sensory organs, which means that perhaps they're the complement to our light body, our
Mm-hmm.
energetic body. So we're only beginning to understand, firstly, that we're much older as an evolving species than 10,000 years in the
Yes.
biblical interpretation. So we
Right.
need to really just go ahead and put that in context and make peace with that and get on with the deal here, because the
Mm-hmm.
whole thing about evolving the planet is a very spiritual work.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't to the exclusion of God consciousness or the knowing of a creator. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is all happening, some would say, in the mind of God anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so in light of that, we connect the sacred, we celebrate the sacred, we don't omit the sacred, but we also don't omit scientific fact and record. You got to bring it into right relationship. So that's one thing in the mending and the healing. The point of healing is to mend where there's been something, you know, broken.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had all these things fragmented in our consciousness, and now we're in the time of actually mending it together and piecing the story together as well along the archaeological record,
Mm-hmm.
like along the artifacts of cultures that are only now being discovered. Like there are cultures from
Yes.
Mesoamerica, as you know, that are only now being recovered, and complexes and city centers and pyramids and mounds that are covered by the jungle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that the modern world doesn't even know yet exist, but now due to technology, some things are able to be identified and found.
Mm-hmm.
Like some children in Europe are finding like Mayan pyramids now using Google Earth or Google
Mm-hmm.
technology to do some mathematical computation to geolocate certain things that are supposed to be and that are actually there. It's amazing.
Wow. It
So
is.
we're in a period of revealing, we're in a period
Mm-hmm.
of healing, you know. And again, if something is causing you stress, be willing to flow and let it go,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not worth your peace and your balance. And that's what this year is also saying to us. It's okay. And let stuff roll off your back, like water off a duck's back, as they say, right? Let it roll off your back.
I like that. Yeah.
You know, because there are things that are going to test you, and you don't want to get caught and going and championing everything that, you know, plucks a nerve. We got to choose wisely how we dispense our energy right now, because we're also at a 0 point frequency. You know what that means?
But
It's the frequency that we find ourselves in at the where it's kind of like considered the speed of thought.
mm-hmm.
So at the speed of a thought, whatever it is that we are energizing or asking for, whether deliberately or not, we're going to
Mm-hmm.
manifest. And I'm not talking about like the law of attraction or something. I'm talking about the laws of the cosmos and how it actually functions specifically. But we're at a point now where thought and the instantaneity of the thought appearing in some form or another, there's no time between. That's why it's called 0 point. So it's as good as the moment, which is a blessing, but it also requires us to be very cognizant of the thoughts we are keeping as we're in the process of each of us healing, because self sabotage is commonplace in the process too,
Mm-hmm.
until we come to learn that we're responsible. We can't put it on anybody outside of ourselves, because there's really only one of us here. It just so happens that we're each operating from our own place of heart centric orientation to the whole,
Mm-hmm.
and not seeing ourselves as isolated, but absolutely interconnected. And that's just part of what I feel is going to help shuttle us through into this future that can look constructive and creative,
Mm-hmm.
and at one in the energetic. You know,
Okay.
we're going to experience, I think, increase with this solar energy, solar radiation, things coming over
Mm-hmm.
the next few years. So we're in the self-existing moon now, and that's great.
Mm-hmm.
And then that gives way next year to the overtone wizard, or like a period of empowerment, essentially.
Okay.
Now, that's important because right now we're clearing the channels. We're healing, we're clearing, we're mending. That's what this year is all about. It's a year to
Healing, clearing, and mending.
healing, clearing, and mending. It's a period to get really clear and definite in that. So, being specific to be terrific, kind of thing, right? To be terrific, you must be specific. So, having the ability to actually give definition and form to what it is we're healing when it's appropriate, you know, just to understand that this is a time when our healing is going to take certain form. It's going to be different for everybody, though,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody's at where they're at in the process. So, we also don't want to be pushy or judgy. You want to give people the space to heal,
Mm-hmm.
because people don't heal under a microscope. They're
Mm-hmm.
going to heal however they're going to heal, and it's okay, you know. And the fact is, when one
Great.
of us are healed, it heals all of us. So
Absolutely.
as we encourage that restoration process personally in our daily walk to whatever
Yes.
degree we can, even if it's as simple as starting the day and throughout the day affirming love and gratitude, just stay in your love and gratitude, because that's a sure way to receive more reasons to be loving and grateful. It's like that's the biofeedback we really want to generate ultimately. Once we can put things in balance and perspective with the variables that each of us are brought here with, because we're each working out a mother's side, a father's side, and our own stuff that we accumulate. So we're doing ancestral lineal healing as well as our own energetic from our own consciousness. It's a little bit of all. But the reason we're here is because we're capable of doing it. If we weren't capable to do it, we wouldn't be here. And that's why we're being observed,
All right.
because there's a lot of souls depending on us
Mm-hmm.
evolving the species at this time, evolving spiritually at this time, reconnecting what was disconnected. So that's a good way to sort of look at what I feel are kind of the guideposts for this next sequence of 13 moons.
Wow.
Hmm.
Great. Can you talk a little bit about the meaning of the term red self-existing moon? Like, for people who
Sure.
are not familiar with the 13 moon 28-day calendar, they don't know the kins and the colors and what
Yes.
each of the symbols mean.
Thank you. And I think
Um,
as you asked me this question, it plants a seed in my mind that we can also maybe at some point have something with some more visuals just to show people, because I don't quite have them
Yes.
at the moment. But it
Sure.
would give a good reason to even have something special that people could click and kind of learn from again and again. But the fundamental basics of the calendar are 13 tones
Mm-hmm.
and 20 what are called tribes, or also referred to as solar seals. So these are basically symbols that represent 20 different personality types that were identified initially by the Maya. They identified them as characteristics in nature, right, for their daykeeper symbols. Now, similarly, in the new time patterning and representation of that, the 20 solar seals represent the personality types generally, as I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
So 13 times 20 gives you a total of 260, which creates the basically 1320 frequency pattern referred to as the Zolkin in the Maya language. So Zolkin means count of days. And so that particular calendar, the 260, is a count of 260 days in a row that relate as the period of human gestation.
Mm-hmm.
So in that period, Kin 69 is the 69th day out of that 260 days where you'll find red self existing moon. Now, the term red moon comes from, again, the 20 archetypes or 20 personality types, and the red moon is the ninth type. It's number 9 out of 20. And the tone that's attributed to that, when you factor the 13 and 20 together, it lines up. The Kin 69 has a tone of 4, which is the self existing tone of form.
Mm-hmm.
And the qualities are form and definition and measurement. That's what form instructs during the creative process, if you will. So we're basically finding ourselves now in the 4th year of a new creative process. So it's not that it just starts this year. We actually began a new, what's called wave spell, which is a terminology in astrophysics, basically, when you're following the pattern of a spiral galaxy or the arm of a galaxy, for example. It's called a wave spell, or the wave, the galactic wave it makes. So when you look at a wave spell in this terminology, it's in the shape of a galactic spiral, basically. It's giving that shape.
Okay.
Because everything that the Maya, for example, were marking, and even observations made by Dr. Arguelles, are reflective of things in nature generally, right?
Yes.
And so spirals are all throughout nature. We know of the Fibonacci sequence, for example, which is another patterning of spiral or spirality in nature. Um, but that being said, the red self existing moon is the code or the kin code of that galactic signature, red self existing moon. And again, self existing is tone 4, red moon is solar seal 9. Um, Interesting to note also in synchronicity, you have numbers. So everything is communicating something.
Mm-hmm.
Tribe 9 plus tone 4, 9 and 4 is 13. Now
Yes.
we know there are 13 moons. Why do we
13 more.
reclaim 13? Because it was what was decidedly shifted from our consciousness, because 13 is also aligned with the divine feminine
Mm-hmm.
often. And so that's why it was considered by the church and by that whole, propaganda as a bad luck number, when in fact it's a functional fractal part of galactic harmonic celestial intelligence. It's not a bad luck number whatsoever. It's actually a
Wow.
key to accessing your galactic consciousness and your natural timing. So by restoring that which was distorted to dominate the feminine
Mm-hmm.
back to its rightful place in balance is what this year actually represents. That's the healing that
Okay.
has to happen. So when you begin to understand the terminologies of the personality types or the archetypes related to the tribes of the solar seals, and then their creative tone out of the 13 tones, you can begin to receive insight as to what those combinations are communicating. And it's a very intuitive, creative language. It's meant to inspire your own creative perception,
Mm-hmm.
because time is not money as it was impressed upon us through the colonial domination. Time is art. Time
Yes.
is an experience of synchronicity as the norm.
Mm-hmm.
That's being in tune with nature and natural cycles is an experience of synchronicity or good timing, or harmonic meaning and arrangement, like real meaning. You know, when you have a synchronicity, you're like, wow, that's just so uncanny. I can't believe that happened. Or wow, that you too. Or, you know, it's a very self-reflective experience, right? And so, but it's nature's expression of itself. I like to say that synchronicity is the nature of nature,
Mm-hmm.
right? The
Absolutely.
perfect timing, synchronization, synchronicity. So
Right.
that's our way as being human to actually have an interaction with nature and the timing factor of nature, you know, the quality of that. And so I'll say one more thing, that 13 and 20 also relate to our physical bodies, because we
Mm-hmm.
have the 13 articulating joints of our body. If
Mm-hmm.
we count our ankles, our knees, our hips, our
Yes.
wrists, elbows, shoulders, and the neck, that's 13 in total. That would be called the aspect of movement, because without these abilities, without these articulating joints, we wouldn't be able to move
Mm-hmm.
our bodies at all. And
Yes.
then you have your 20 fingers and toes that serve the purpose for measurement. So
Mm-hmm.
that's where we get definition and form. You got four sets of digits. We know four is the number of measurement and
Right.
definition and form. We're in the 4 year, the 4 moon. So
Okay.
this is the year for our healing to take form, in other words. Like
Wow.
we
Okay.
are the embodiment of the restoration. You know, we're the embodiment of balance. We're helping restore balance where it's been deliberately distorted or destroyed outright for centuries now, if not millennia,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so by some accounts, that's just a blink of an eye,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but obviously in the human experience, it seems like a long time,
Right.
right? But that's why also in scripture it says, doesn't it, that one day to God is a
Like
thousand
a
years to
thousand
man.
years to man. Right.
So what are we dealing with here? That's
Mm-hmm.
why I say we want to reconfigure, we want to recalibrate our perspective
Mm-hmm.
that we're
Absolutely.
just some 6,000 or 10,000 year old situation,
Mm-hmm.
that we go back. Now, the way that we may have been manifested may have looked differently as a physiological constitution 10,000 years ago, or 20,000 years ago, or even 50,000 years ago, of course. That the humans we are today are an evolution of who we once were. Now, to what degree, I think we became more and more dense.
Mm-hmm.
So we became so physically dense in that
Mm-hmm.
part of the process that we can't become any more dense than we've become.
Yeah.
So
More
now the
dense and less
only,
spiritual.
and less spiritual.
More
So that's
focus on the
the
physical
material,
manifestation. Right.
exactly. So that's part of the reason to reorient our consciousness
Mm-hmm.
out of just associating only solely with the material. Even as we have to find ways to thrive and live in life, it's come to such a large degree at the sacrifice of our well-being, you know, and our quality of life for so long, that we've just accepted, well, this is it. This is just my lot in life. This is how it is. And I don't know if I agree with that. I think that where we're at is we have the opportunity to forge new behaviors and
Mm-hmm.
create new relationships and define new ways of having and living in community,
Mm-hmm.
or through shared culture or cosmovision or perception. We want to evolve these perceptions, because it is our thoughts that's going to inform the things that we perpetuate, right? So we want to
Yes.
examine it through some clarity, and get some broader perspective. And that's why tuning into the frequencies of natural time, I feel, opens up the palette of colors that you as a creative being may have before now thought you had to play with. It just opens the panorama of the colors of possibility for what it is you actually can do, how you can show up in the world, how you can be of service ultimately. Because the 13 moon calendar is also referred to as the planetary service wave spell. So
Mm-hmm.
that whole sequence of 13 moons, that year, is considered, you know, a cycle through which whatever form your service takes, you know, it can follow that creative pattern. That's another one of the ways to plug in with the natural time frequency. You
Okay.
know,
Great. All right. Now, can you share with us? This was like a lot of wealth of
Yeah.
information on this natural time, especially in this new each new year has such a great um focus, and I want to say theme and guiding principle. But is
Mm.
which calendar do you recommend that we use, um the most accurate one? Because I know it's several out there, like the Law of Time, they have one, and then there's another one with the 1328. Which one do you recommend? Because I know you were reading the affirmation from something.
Well, I was using an app actually that I do use on a regular basis. It's a phone app for iOS, and it's called I don't know if you can see that on the. Let me try to get
It's
it on
a
the
glare
camera.
a little bit. What's
Yeah, a
what's
little
the
bit
name
of
of the
glare.
app?
The app is called 1320 Sync.
13
1320 Sync, and it allows you to basically see the
SYNCE.
SYNC. Yeah,
That's
1320 Sync, and that's the name of the app. It's on iOS, so for iPhone. And there are apps that are for Android that you can look up by the word Dream Spell Calendar. That may be another way to find it.
Dream
Dream
Spell
Spell.
Calendar.
Yeah, that for Android devices. And then the one I like to recommend to people, there's a couple of them actually. If people want to go to 13moon.com
Mhm.
/ hashtag natural time. That's a great calendar. That's one of the best calendars out there. And it's not that any of them are not accurate. They're all accurate. It's just that they're also all displaying different aspects of this very broad body of information, right?
Mhm.
So I think as a good calendar for home use and just kind of daily tuning in, it's packed full of a
Yes.
lot of the fundamental information as well. It gives you the details about the qualities of the tones and the solar seals and
Right.
all that information.
Mhm.
So that's called the Galactic Calendar at 13moon.com / hashtag natural time. I definitely recommend that one. Also, the 13 Moon Star Travelers Almanac and Synchronometer, or Guide to Synchronicity, from the lawoftime.org.
Law of
That's
Time.
the
Okay.
current one that is definitely recommended. That's quite advanced. That gets into some of the other time lenses that
Mhm.
correlate to this repository of information, because being that it's almost like we have come to a place in our evolutionary expanse. I mean, obviously, we're all exposed to the information age now. Now, in this time, we've also been exposed to other worlds. And like I said, on a frequency like yesterday's day that kicked off the year, it's a gap day,
Mhm. Mhm.
galactic activation portal.
Mhm.
We're also exposed to more knowledge, more lights, information, data
Mhm.
is streaming into our planetary system, and each of us in
Absolutely.
variable ways. Like we're all tuning in to different frequencies, right?
Mhm.
So, with the frequency of natural time, there's so much information that constitutes the knowledge base. Now, the almanac from lawoftime.org is very dense in that it contains basically all the information that one would need to really, uh, shall we say, gain some comprehensive understanding of the complexities of those various layers.
Mhm.
And they're all approached as a meditation practice. And by that, I don't mean like there is some physical yoga, there's some mudras you could apply as well on the 7-day basis, things
Mhm.
like that that just really become part of a practice, which is referred to as synchrogalactic yoga.
Mhm.
That's a
I
term
like
for
that.
where you're actually being cognizant to the 7-day sequence, the 7 days of the week, right? But it's referred to as a heptad cycle, so a cycle of 7. And each of those days relates to one of your chakras, and it
Mhm.
basically connects what's called a radial plasma, okay, which is charged ionic plasma
Mhm.
to or plugging it into that respective chakra.
Mhm.
So it says using the imaginal realm or knowing that we're constantly surrounded by charged particles, right? But
Yes.
it's a matter of focusing that energy, that creative substance, in a deliberate way that can then be activated specifically with energetic purpose into your chakra system. So
Mhm.
it's an interesting practice because we've heard about chakras and aligning our chakras and balancing our chakras and getting them all in proper flow. Now,
Mm-hmm.
this is taking it to another level because you're actually activating these radioplasmas that are information packets from the sun. It's on a daily way. This is what's informing our human evolution. And
Mm-hmm.
again, it's whether we know it or not. It's happening to us and through us, even while we're asleep. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
just when you become conscious of it, now you become a collaborator with it. This is like actually becoming a collaborator with creation
Yes.
instead of it just happening to you and you're sort of, trying to figure it out or whatever. Like, this is actually now some methods and practices that you can become a coherent, conscious co-collaborator with the creative process. And
Yes.
that also is a reflection of becoming more responsible and accountable to what we're creating.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're actually being more spiritualized, you're not going to be thinking of the things I can just go create for my own benefit. You want to think of creating a healing center or creating something that people can benefit from or receive information or support, from a community or things of that nature. So, it's a very interesting thing. So yeah, the Law of Time, I think, is a great resource for their almanac, very thick synchronometer. And then 13moon.com, as I mentioned as well, to find the current year galactic calendar. If people want to visit also the work I do, we give away a
Mm-hmm.
free calendar. It's at
Yes.
13 months, 28 days.info, 13
Right.
months, 28 days.info. And our purpose is to really help more specifically teach people the basis for calendar change as a systems change.
I'm gonna put
And
it in
then
the chat.
sure. And we
You
want
said
to we want to
it's
impress upon
13 months, 28 days. Info.
that's right. 13 months, 28 days.info. And there people will find the current year synchronom or calendar that we gift. The calendar we gift is a 13-month, 28-day calendar. It does indicate the Zolkin day. So, for example, yesterday in the upper right-hand corner of day 1, you'll see number 69 because that's the kin number for red self-existing moon. Today is kin 70. We're in the overtone dog day today.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also, auspiciously, we're dog. When we speak of the dog, we're talking about really Sirius dog star, right? The head of
Yes.
Canis Major constellation. So that's where it's a symbolic creative reference to that number, that frequency, kin number 70. So that's today. So tomorrow will obviously be kin number 71, even though it's day 3 of moon 1. It's got a kin number that's part of that gestation period, 260 days of
Yes.
number 71 tomorrow. So people can see how to navigate that with the calendar we provide as well as a gift. Uh,
Okay.
just to folks that want to learn more and begin to shift their perception of time.
Okay.
And we're also doing some other advanced stuff where we're looking at the number 52, for example, and other calendrical lenses, because as you begin to observe these patterns, geometry emerges. Different things begin to emerge, and you become self reflective and self aware of these synchronizations and these basically these recurring cycles in timing, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what we see traditional cultures have mapped and been tracking for thousands of years in their calendar systems, like the Maya,
Mm-hmm.
as well as other systems and other calendar systems alike, whether it's the systems of the Vedas, for example, which have their own calendar systems that track the various yugas
Mm-hmm.
of the ages of transformation. The one
Right.
thing I'll say, just kind of in closing, is all of these systems, what we're finding is that they're all basically describing the same thing from different vantages.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of them being considered as separate or greater or lesser than each other, we want to consider them in a neutral state of mind to understand how they're all interrelated. Just like the human family is interrelated, though we may perceive ourselves to have all these variables and we may consider ourselves separate for one reason or another. Yet and still, we're all here on the same planet. So even
Yes.
in just that fundamental way, we're all related.
Okay.
We're all sharing the same air.
Mm-hmm.
We're all part of this organic biological experience that I think is on its way to becoming cognizant that it's actually one,
Mm-hmm.
that separation has always been an illusion.
Mm-hmm.
It's just we're getting more evolved in how we can approach that. So yeah, I'm again very grateful for the chance to spend time with you and your beautiful
Thank you.
forum, Queen Tamara. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I really, really appreciate
Yes.
that. Yeah,
Thank you.
excited
And
to
thank you
share
for
it.
sharing that with us. I like to, ever since I first learned about natural time from you, I think back in 2011, I've
Mm,
been striving to study and learn more about it. And it's very helpful with helping you to live in the harmony with the time and frequency of the planet, which I feel like there's a great um, revival to that because people are talking more about time and art and nature and being in harmony with nature, living with nature cycles as people slowly and not so slowly for some people get away from the old system and paradigm. So I really appreciate love that you continue to teach this and share that with the listening audience.
mm,
And
yeah.
I will be reaching out to you to get my calendar.
For sure, absolutely, absolutely, and
Okay.
people can feel free to reach me via my name, Mikuak at theharmonicfactor.com.
Wait a minute.
Uh,
At the harmonic factor.
yeah, that's another one of our website resources there. It gets a little bit more in depth and kind of into the
.com. What
Fibonacci.
about the Planet Restoration one?
That's also another platform that we have that's more the arts based and music
Should I
focused.
include that?
You can, absolutely. Planetrestoration.info. We invite people to check us out there. We're doing more media about the different elders and knowledge traditions, venerating elder wisdom, and continue to keep that in the consciousness and in the
Mhm.
conversation with people. So yeah, Planet Restoration is very very much involved, and that's shout out to my brothers Bilal and Taj Abdul Samad and my partner
Mhm.
Ishel, who are very instrumental with that. And a
Yes.
big shout out to my brother Ruben Yenes, who is with
Mhm.
the Harmonic Factor and 13 months, 28 days.info.
Okay.
People can follow us also if they want to dive a little deeper. They can follow us at Harmonic Convergence 2028 on Facebook. So if you go to Facebook, you'll find Harmonic Convergence 2022 2028. But the address is facebook.com/Harmonic Convergence 2028.
All right, let me try to put this.
Yeah.
Facebook.
Yeah.
Say it again. Facebook forward
Uh,
slash.
a Harmonic Convergence.
Is that capital? To
No, it doesn't have to be. Yeah, Harmonic
Harmonic Convergence 2028.
2028.
Is that
Yes,
all one word?
all one word. Yeah, and they can also find us on Instagram at the Harmonic Factor on Instagram. So that's a good place to follow up if they want to kind of get into more of the information around the calendar. But if anybody has any questions, I mean, this is definitely part of my purpose. So I'm here to try to help distill it and make it plain as plain as possible for people. But I definitely say get a tool, get a calendar that you can begin to study, just to
Mhm.
firstly find out what your galactic signature is, right?
Yes.
And I know in your case, you're
It's
overtone sun, right?
yellow overtone sun. Yes.
Right, you're the overtone sun. So yeah, I mean that's fantastic. So and tomorrow, for what it's worth, actually today, I'm sorry, today's your tone. It's overtone today. So
Today's
we're in the
over.
overtone tone today of the white dog.
Okay.
So yeah, that's good for you to even be aware of in light of synchronicity. When a
Hmm.
day may have your particular solar seal or your particular tone, that's a
Hmm.
day for you to pay attention to the synchronicities that are going to emerge naturally, just
Hmm.
giving your attention to them. That's
Yes.
kind of how it becomes sort of self-reflected.
Absolutely.
Thank you
Well,
again.
thanks. Thank you, and thank you for sharing with the audience. Don't go away just yet. But
Okay.
everyone, thank you so much for watching and tuning in. Hope this was very beneficial and informative as we all strive to create this new earth on our planet and live together in harmony, peace, forgiveness, and love. And so please contact Brother Mikuak Rai at the following places that are in the chat room. And we look forward to you next time. Peace and love, everyone.
And Lakesh, blessed love.
Lakesh.